Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Carolyn Waters, head librarian here at the New York Society Library. We are delighted to have so many of you with us today, and I understand we have people here from as far away as London, Ontario, and London, England, so this is very exciting. This is going to be a real treat to hear from Brewster Kahle of the Internet Archive, talking about universal access to all knowledge. But before we get started, I'm going to assume that for many of you, this is either your first visit to the New York Society Library or the first time you've heard about us. So if you'll indulge me, I'd like to just tell you a little bit about us. We are the oldest library and cultural institution in New York City, founded in 1754. As a membership library founded prior to the advent of the taxpayer-supported public library system, we rely on membership fees to operate. Membership is open to all, as it always has been, and library members have access to browse and check out books from our collection of over 300,000 volumes in open stacks right here in this building, this one location, thousands of ebooks and digital magazines and electronic resources, and the use of our beautiful and quiet reading and study spaces, as well as a children's library. However, we have plenty for non-members to take advantage of as well. Our reference room and our exhibition gallery and many of our events, like the one you're attending today, are free and open to the public. We also have a fully searchable digital database of circulation records from our early membership history from 1789 to 1805, which reveals the borrowing records of members like George Washington, John Adams, John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, Aaron Burr, and 57 women readers as well, which we're very proud about. We have a new exhibition, Fabulous Fashion, that will be opening next week, and I hope that you will stop by at some point to see that. Now, we have a big program today in two parts. In the first hour, Brewster Kahle is going to tell us all about the Internet Archive and how to use it. In the second hour, Brewster will be in conversation with Maria Bustillos, talking about universal access to all knowledge, technology, societies, and legalities. Just a way of introduction, Brewster Kahle is the founder and digital librarian of the Internet Archive, one of the largest libraries in the world. He is a passionate advocate for public internet access and a successful entrepreneur. He spent his entire career intent on a singular focus, providing universal access to all knowledge. Brewster is an Internet Hall of Fame inductee and a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, among many other various honor awards. There's an awful lot I could say about him, but we would be here all day. So I think we would rather just hear from Brewster. So welcome, and please welcome Brewster Kahle.
Carolyn, thank you very much. Okay, this is a really special library. Not only is it beautiful, it's great people involved in it, but it's one of an extant set of about 21 subscription libraries. So Ben Franklin started a system to go and have these subscription libraries. You put in some money, they buy the collection of books, and you can all read it. And in proper Ben Franklin style, when more people wanted to do it, he didn't make franchises where he owned and controlled everything. He said, here's how you can do it too. And so these went wild. And there were 3,000 of them, I'm told, at the height of these about the Civil War. And then Andrew Carnegie socialized the library system. I love saying that. Andrew Carnegie socialized the library system, right? One of the most ferocious capitalists this country has ever had, basically thought that there's something special about libraries, that they operate in a very different way than in commerce. So you're in a special place, and thank you very much for inviting me here. So this is the New York Society Library webpage from 1999, which is I think kind of excellent. And I thought I would just show you just a little bit about where you are, if the network gods obey. So probably the Internet Archive is best known for the Wayback Machine. Also, it has books, music, video. I'll give you kind of an idea. But this is just to kind of show you the where you are. And this is actually quite a typical 1999 website. And it's kind of great. Then I also looked up the New York Society Library in the books collection of the Internet Archive, and also all the periodicals. And it appears in 9,000 books and periodicals, and you can click and see and read them. There's the famous history of the colonial New York that was written by Keith, but there's all sorts of other things, writing in the garden, right? So that there's this beautiful book about where to write, and I think the New York Society Library is one of those places. New York Intellect Shelf, and it's also in lots of, there was a book of book plates that has the book plate from the New York. So I'm doing full text search to find occurrences of New York Society Library in all of these periodicals over time and over centuries, and you can go and take them out. Oh, it's even in Library Journal in 1954, when the library was celebrating its 200th anniversary, and you have to borrow this because it's still has rights issues. So I will click to borrow the Library Journal issue from 1954, and here's your announcement of your 200th anniversary, and cool pictures of the history. Anyway, you're someplace special, and I just wanted to highlight that. Then let's see. Go back into slide view. So I'm Brewster Kahle, founder and digital librarian of the Internet Archive, a large nonprofit library that's focused on universal access to all knowledge. That was the dream of the internet that I signed up to try to deliver. So the idea of how do you go and make it so that if you're curious enough to want to have access to anything ever published, you could do it. Could we one-up the Greeks? The Greeks and the Egyptians did the Library of Alexandria, but you had to go to Alexandria and have some in with the Ptolemies or whatever to be able to get access. Could we do this so that you could be anywhere in the world and have that kind of access? Technologically, absolutely. But why aren't we there yet, right? And I'd say it's because our institutions have not been evolving fast enough. And we're suffering for it because this generation assumes it's all online. If it's not online, it's as if it doesn't exist. They just pretty much use what's online. So they kind of went along with the, hey, it's going to be this way, and now we have to deliver it, guys. So we're here to try to do our piece, but New York Society Library, we've got all pieces to try to do this. So I thought I would try in this time to leave time for questions. And hopefully we can do them also from the online world. But I thought I would just try to give you an overview of what the Internet Archive is and sort of how to think of it. Then do two projects. One is Interlibrary Loan, and another is turn all the references blue. Can we go and make it so footnotes turn live? So you can just click on footnotes and go. And so how are we doing towards those two projects? And then hopefully that leaves us some time for questions, so that you'll hopefully go back and use these. So I'm going to start out actually with a story and then an overview. So there's Mary Grove College. Mary Grove College is in the Detroit area that was founded over 100 years ago, but it basically went out of business. So Mary Grove College closed, and they wanted to know what to do with their books. So they donated them to the Internet Archive, and we digitized them. And we're now making them available again through ILL, through machine learning, but also through controlled digital lending. So a library is much more than just a collection of books. So could you go and keep the community alive? Could you go and continue to make that collection and virtually keep it alive? There's a lot of learning, there's a lot of community in a collection. The selection, presentation, and the like. Can we bring that alive in a digital world? And we tried with Marygrove College. It's now 89,000 books that you can go browse and click on, read a little bit of, and be able to borrow those books, one reader at a time. One reader at a time, to be able to keep the spirit of Marygrove College alive. We've now started to get other libraries, the Claremont Theological Library. That came into the Internet Archive. We've digitized it, and adding now another library that closed, which is the Evangelical College in Pennsylvania. And we're starting to now get fabulous collection of theological materials that you can look by where it came from, but also across all of them and with full text, to be able to go and ensure that those collections and communities stay supported with what they've been using. So other things at the Internet Archive. So I'm going to do sort of the overview thing with, blurred, lots of numbers. The Television News Archive, we record all of television, Russian, Chinese, Japanese, Iraqi, Al Jazeera, BBC, CNN, ABC, Fox, 24 hours a day, DVD quality. We make the US television news available searchably, so you can go and search what people said, find clips, and be able to reference those by having a link straight into television and what they said. Because as a high school student growing up in Westchester, they said to be able to think critically, you need to be able to quote, compare and contrast. Quote, and then compare and contrast. If you can't quote, then you can't hold on to it and pull it out. And it just flows over. And you just don't, and it sort of absorbs, but you can't think critically about it. So we wanted to be able to help people think critically about television. And so we've been recording this and making it available. It was used by a major New York Times piece about the Tucker Carlson show that came out a couple of weeks ago, where we gave them with all of the transcripts of everything, all of the Tucker Carlson shows ever. And they were able to go and study sort of how does it look like in a big picture. It was a major project at the New York Times to go and do, and it was enabled by the Internet Archive's Television News Archive. So people are starting to get bigger pictures by going and being able to see and dive into these sorts of materials. We're also recording radio, a lot of radio that if you've ever been sort of in the Midwest and put on AM radio, highly recommend it. Actually, even in San Francisco or New York, it's wild. So being able, and it's affecting a lot of people. It's heavily promoted, it's often political, and it's having a big effect, but we need it in our libraries so that we can go and analyze it, to go and do speech to text and be able to go and analyze what it is that's going on out there. Jason Scott, who's in the audience here, runs the software collection. And the idea is to try to make it so that all the old software that are floppies that are rotting, can we get enduring access to those software? And then can we actually bring it to life? And Jason had this idea. He said, what you really want to do is go to a web page and actually see the software run. So how are you going to do that? Right? Are you going to connect to an old IBM PC someplace? I said, yeah, we could do that. He said, no. There's an easier, better way. Maybe not easier. There's a better way. Can we go and take the C code emulators of the old IBM PCs or Apple IIs, cross-compile it into JavaScript, and then when you click on it, you go and download a JavaScript version of an IBM PC. It boots in your browser and uses the Internet Archive as a large floppy drive. It's like, he said, that would never work. And he said, let's, I have no budget, but I have lots of friends, and let's go and see if we can try to get this to work. And he brought it back to life, the emulator, so you can go and see these old games and arcade games. And Jason, how many different platforms are now on?
Oh, let's go with about 25 major ones.
25 major platforms. How many software titles?
250,000.
250,000. So these are creative works of humankind that we want to keep alive for another generation to use. So games, MS-DOS games are the most popular, but we also have the old productivity software of where it came from. Also, we want all music. So not only streaming, but the CD era, the LP, the microgroove recordings, LPs and 45s. Then before that was 78s, and before that was cylinders. So we want it all, right? We want to make it so it's universal access to all knowledge. So it's one of my fun projects is really going after the 78s. And we're getting them donated first from the Boston Public Library, gave us all of theirs, University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana, but lots of private collectors as well. 78 RPM records, and we're digitizing these. We have 390,000 of these, and they're fabulous. They all sound a little, 78s are, the crank, the horn, the dog, that, right? It's those. And that's going and bringing that to a new generation. It's before my time. They're really wonderful things that we can learn from and grow from. Video and images, we have millions of them that have been uploaded. They've been often categorized and put into collections. So that people are participating in this, not just by going and taking old stuff that's in libraries, but also people are uploading a lot of things. We're probably best known for the Wayback Machine. This is an archive of web pages that we started in 1996 to collect every web page from every website at least every 2 months. And it's been going on since then, and it's getting big. And it's not just by having a stupid robot go around. There are now almost 1,000 libraries that are using an archiving tool to go and say what should be collected at what frequency, but also individuals are going and contributing to build this that is used by hundreds of thousands of people a day. The Internet Archive is about the 300th most popular website. So that means there are 300 that are more popular than we are, but there are 100 million that are less. So people do want a lot of these old materials. So for instance, this is a tweet from Trump, which is no longer on the web. In fact, no Trump tweets are on the net. So we have the public collection of his, but he went and said that Google was biased by not reporting on his inauguration the same way that Google reported on Barack Obama's. And so we dialed the Wayback Machine and found, nope, it was up. And it was up as much as Obama. So you just can't get away with just making stuff up and putting it out if you got librarians around that are willing to kind of go and say, no, let's go and look that up. And so the idea is to try to have these things so you just can't change the past, which is starting to become so much in style these days. So so these are some of the another thing for the Wayback Machine. We're trying to provide context banners on some things. Right? I'd say the answer to bad speech is more context. Right? So if you're coming across things, tell me about it. Right? It's not going and just making it all disappear. It's going and say, no, this thing's debunked. So this is from Russian state media, and there's information about what this was saying. There's also been people that have used the Internet Archive to go and hold people to account. There was somebody that was very excited to have shot down a military aircraft over Ukraine. It turned out to be a commercial aircraft over Ukraine. It was a Russian supported separatist in Ukraine that did this. They put it up on his Facebook page or whatever it was. Well, there were 5 people that said, save this page now. So we did, and it was only up for maybe 15, 20 minutes before they figured out it was a commercial airliner, but it was saved. So the idea of being able to have these things so that you can go and refer to them, it sometimes turned out to be very important. So context banners are something we're highly pursuing. So how do we build this collection? We get about almost 1 billion URLs a day. I mean, it's the scale of it is really kind of hard to imagine, but we use triggers from lots of different places. So WordPress, whenever somebody has a blog that has a new link in it, we get it right away. Edgy Wikipedia, whenever somebody goes and posts a URL, we get it right away. And we just use these as triggers to say, collect these, so that we can make sure that we have them. We're also doing Sutro, is a project that's going and collecting Ukrainian websites that are, in danger and being taken down. So there's a lot of volunteers that are pulling all of these things in and putting them into the Internet Archive's web collections, and it's now enduringly usable by people. We're also trying to collect Russian websites because Russia is starting to go offline. They're cutting themselves off. It's the new Cold War. So we have different features. You can go and save page now when you have a URL that you need to get into the known. It's used by journalists all the time. It's used by people all the time. It's used about 80 times a second. So it's just, people are basically going and feeding information in that way, but we also have lots of different crawlers through Archive It and the like. Okay, if you go and crawl one and say you should crawl this one page on CNN, it might then have 388 little embedded files, which then we might get all of the outlinks, and then it turns into 30,000 URLs that we have to collect to be able to get that page such that you think that we have it. So it turns out to be kind of technically challenging. We have a browser extension that I hope you'll use that intercepts 404s and other things so that it basically makes the web better and more reliable. All free. Save page now, archive it. So that's sort of the web collection. Books. So I mentioned a little bit about books like the Mary Grove. We have operated another site called openlibrary.org, which is a way you can browse. The idea of Open Library is one web page for every book ever published, whether the Internet Archive has the book or not. It's information about it and where you might get it. Where could you buy it physically? Where can you be able to go and borrow it electronically from some other place? How do you buy it electronically? All of that. How do we go and have one web page for every book? So please try openlibrary.org. It's kind of like a Goodreads, but not affiliated with Amazon. So it's trying to basically scratch that itch for all of us book lovers, and frankly, what else is there, right? I mean, for the love of books. So I'm going to talk about a couple projects, and then hopefully that will spur online questions as well as you folks here. Interlibrary Loan. This is something that we started doing seriously a year ago because our periodicals collection started to get big enough. And Interlibrary Loan is this kind of great little superpower of libraries. It's sort of the original peer-to-peer network. It's, you just ask for it, and then your other libraries just make it come true, and it operates for you. It's kind of magical, and I think we can do so much more with Interlibrary Loan. And I love that there are actually comics about Interlibrary Loan. So we started getting a periodicals collection, both by crawling the web for long tail articles that are posted on the web. We have about 30 million articles now, but we've also digitized 14,000 titles. So we have an enormous collection of periodicals, and we have millions of books. And there are these networks that libraries like this would go and type in, hey, my patron wants this, and it sort of sends it out over either OCLC or RapidILL to go and request it. And the Internet Archive is trying to answer those, as well as having our patrons be able to ask questions and get things from these other libraries. So how is that all working? We joined the Boston Library Consortium to expand resource sharing. We have joined Rapid ILL. There are now over 250 libraries that have borrowed from us, on average of 100 articles or book chapters already for each of these groups. I think maybe 200. Anyway, so it's going great. And I actually fulfill a lot of these. I'm on the weekend crew. Because we're digital, we do this online. So I was in my hotel this morning and there were 4 or 5 pending requests. So I got on and I did it. And it's completely fun. It gets you tapped into what people are looking for. I don't know who's asking. I know what college is asking or what library is asking. And these are some of the titles from some of the ILL requests that I've done, much less all the other people. So we have an ILL fulfillment team around the world. So we basically try to answer questions no matter when it is, within an hour, often it's within a few minutes. And we get back to people 24 hours a day all around the world. We use Rapid ILL, IDS Project, Iliad, and WorldShare. But mostly they come in through this system called Rapid ILL. So kind of interesting. What do we get asked for? We get asked for a lot of things from periodicals, about 2/3 from periodicals, 1/3 from books. And they're mostly in the 1990s, or at least the peak is in the 1990s. And so we're kind of the long tail library. We're the library that can go and have enormous collections. And a lot of libraries they have space constraints. And so they are throwing their stuff away. Or often what they're doing is they're giving them to us. So they're deaccessioning to us. So Jeremy, who's here, Jeremy, you run some of the away teams helping pack. What's a recent one and how many, like Chicago?
Chicago will be about 600,000 volumes at the session.
So they're deaccessioning 600,000 volumes. And so the Internet Archive is called in, we pack them, we put them in boxes, we ship them to our physical archives and we keep them forever. And when we have funding, we basically digitize these and then make them as available as we can, for instance, through Interlibrary Loan and through the controlled digital lending or the machine learning or for the print disabled and all these different services. So the idea is to go and make that, and that's just one, right? And so we're just getting more and more because libraries need their space back because people are using these things online. They want to go and use it for other things. And so this is better than throwing them away. They give them to us. We may build these large collections and keep the physical materials forever. We ramped up over the last year. It's sort of stabilizing at about 200 fulfillments per day. That's in ILL world, that's superhero status. In the web world, 200 a day is sort of like, right? So I think there's so much more we can do with the Interlibrary Loan, but that's sort of where we are. That big dip is Christmas time. So that's students not being, graduate students and professors, they're being on holiday. Where do a lot of our books come from? They're donated by books. Better World Books also donates things to us. We've given them a wish list based on what's in Wikipedia. So all the Wikipedia links, and I'm going to talk about turning the references blue. And so we prioritize those into one batch, but we get everything we don't have. We want one copy physically of everything we don't have, and we want one copy digitally of everything we don't have. We want all of it. Here we do all the books, music, video. So that was ILL. So let's talk about turn all the references blue. So this is right after the 2016 election. I called together a heads of the other tech nonprofits in the San Francisco area, the head of Wikipedia, head of Mozilla, head of Electronic Frontier Foundation, the head of the Freedom of the Press Foundation, said, what do we do now? So no matter who you wanted to be elected during that election, how the election went through was a travesty. It was, the information warfare, the misinformation, the reporters not doing their jobs, the primary systems going wrong, all sorts of things went way wrong. So we said, what can we do? And I said, the Internet Archive is up for trying to help. And the head of Wikipedia, Catherine Maher, said she was worried that truth might fracture. Truth might fracture. I said, that sounds horrible. What does that mean? And she said that Wikipedia is based on this idea that on any subject, there will be a consensus as to what on that article will settle. It'll be pushed and pulled, but there'll only be one. She was worrying that there might be two, and that would break Wikipedia. So we can't break Wikipedia, right? What can I do to help? And she said something I'd never heard before. She said, there's citation wars. What citation wars is behind every one of these pages, especially the contested ones. There's a wrestle match of what assertions make it into the Wikipedia article. And the way that you win in a citation war is based on how hefty, the source is, how credible the source is, but also can you click on it? If you can't click on it, people can't go and confirm it. And if you can't confirm it, why should you believe it, right? And I said, okay, all help. All go and digitize all of it. I'll turn all of your references blue. See, how? I said, we got an army, right? We got librarians on your side. And so we thought we should go and do this. So we started with Wikipedia, but we want to do, that's all footnotes on everything turn blue, so that you can go and click through. And then we also want to make it so that those writers, contributors, writers of new books or Wikipedia articles have the best access to all the best things, so that they make the best articles and then cite them. So we're on that path, and we have for years. So there's a core team of people working on it, and this is this project. So the idea is to live that Star Trek life of we want access to all the knowledge. This was dreamed of by Vannevar Bush in the Memex in a 1945 article. Well worth it. It's really a fabulous, as we may think. And he said and his technology, his diagram, was a desk full of microfilm, right? Of how that was the technology innovation of the day. But of course, we now know it's the internet. So can we build that? And Ted Nelson, Project Xanadu, also had the hypertext links. He came up with the concept of hypertext. A good friend who lives in New Jersey. And the idea is to make hypertext links work. And I think footnotes are kind of latent hypertext links. They should be hypertext links. They're supposed to be. But following them is a pain, right? It's a pain. So you don't do it very often. So how do we go and fix that? So let's take the book citations in Wikipedia, all the book citations, and if you see one down at the bottom, you click and you open right to the right page. And you can flip maybe one page back and page forward, and beyond that, then you have to borrow the book. And if somebody else has it checked out, you wait. But it turns out that a lot of these are long tail books, and you don't have to wait. And so it's basically driving a lot of people into the middle of books. And isn't that the right thing? To go and have these books more available. So how's it going? Well, it's kind of challenging. You have to add links to things by going and identifying the resources, going and doing the semantics, even on a Wikipedia page. It turns out that there's lots of different formats for what a book is, and you have to find the book, and then you have to annotate it. There's also good links go bad. So even if there's a link already there, it may be a 404 document not found, or it might have content drifted. So we try to detect all of those things, either unlinked things, the links that are broken, or things that are content drifted away from what the author intended to link to, and we work on it. We have a bot that has now fixed 25 million Wikipedia citations and put them to the Wayback Machine to have an enduringly accurate, solid link. So fixing 25 million footnotes by having a robot run over 78 different Wikipedia sites. So I'm kind of proud of that accomplishment. It's on lots of different Wikipedia language editions. There's not just English out there. And the community of each one of those language sites has had to approve it. So it is, working with those communities is not easy. They're picky. They don't want their Wikipedias to be smashed by robots. So it's difficult. But how do we now do it for books? Like what if you have paper but it's not digitized? Well, that's not clickable. How about paper that's digitized but doesn't have any, hasn't been made into links? Sometimes we can go and take paper, digitize it, and link it. Then there's Born Digital. Most Born Digital books, EPUBs, they don't have links, even if it's a HTTP in the bottom of your Kindle. You can't click on it. It's the dumbest thing ever. And so how do we go and fix the publishing system to go and make it so that we can make it easy for people to go further? Again, Better World Books has been helping by picking out books that we need. And we're now, this is a demo, but I think we'll move, instead of a demo, I'll just talk it through. But in Wikipedia, we link straight to the books in a lot of cases. And now we're also linking to other, I guess we have more than 1 million links now to 500,000 different books that are on the archive that then you can go to and be able to see. And why do we do this? We're really proud that we're the #1 destination from Wikipedia. So of the places people go from Wikipedia, which is the #5 website, we're about the number 300. Okay, I'm a little envious. But they're the #5 website. The #1 place people go from Wikipedia is to the Internet Archive. This was from 2019. It was mostly the web, but it's been growing to be more and more books. So links to Wayback Machine links as well. We're sourcing not just English, but all sorts of different languages and hooking them in. We want to go and have more further reading sections because people are starting with Wikipedia as the catalog. I do, right? You get a little bit and you want to go deeper. We want to be a place you go deeper. Lots of Wikipedia community support. And we're trying to now move into going and putting links into the Internet Archive from ebooks. So we're working with publishers to try to get it so that they'll go and put links, and we work with the authors sometimes to go and get the things that they're linking to. Sometimes they have them in their files. We digitize them, put them up on the Internet Archive so that you can go to the Internet Archive from ebooks that you get through Kindle or the like. Silicon Valley Values, none of the links were clickable, and so we're trying to fix that. But there's a recent Kindle book that all the links were clickable, so there's reason to think that even Amazon will help. So then the Mueller report came out, but none of the footnotes were live. So there was an enormous effort by about 12 people for months to go and try to get all of them. There were government documents, and we didn't get all of them, but we got 747 links and made a new version with the DPLA of this Mueller report to make it so there's a more usable document, more web-oriented document. We're now trying to link to from books into the television news archive, and also from the television news archive into books, so that when something is mentioned, you can go and find out what the heck was being talked about. Like in this case, a Donald Trump book. So can we get links also to citations and software? Right? So can we interlink the whole world? And Open Syllabus is this wonderful project of syllabi from hundreds of thousands of classes. Can you make those linked to books that you can then refer to and be able to check out? And that might be all you need. But if there's a whole classroom going for it, then you're going to have to buy it. That's where we only have one copy. And then we have links to digital books. So this is the group that's turned all the references blue. Lots of different communities trying to pull this together. So that's going to end my my talk for this first hour. I'm hoping that I said something controversial enough or questionable enough or something or unclear enough that you'll ask some more questions, and then we'll take a short break, very short break, and then I'm going to be in conversation with Maria Bustillos about the future of libraries. So thank you very much. Do you have any questions? Okay, so if I understand the question or the observation, the question is people are trying to figure out the truth, right? That's the goal out there. Does the Internet Archive have any staff of people that figure out what's true or work with people that say that something's not true? The answer is no, we don't. We're a library. We have librarians, but we do correlate a lot of information from fact-checking organizations and try to surface that, or we try to surface context or the like, and be able to provide context for what people are looking at. It's even those fact-checking things have often turned out to not really do what you'd imagine. That if you come across something that you believe and there's a fact check that says, no, it's not true, people just throw out the whole fact check. So how do we go and provide context to help people out? Well, we can say whether what was said, we can say information around it, but we don't feel like we're in the position to say that's true or not. Ms. Marie.
Hey, as a journalist, I work on these issues a lot. And what I think is people have to, nobody can tell you what's true. If somebody else tells you this is true, that doesn't count. You have to arrive at it yourself. So like what a library should do, or what a journalist should do, or what anybody should do is like show their work. And I can tell you, here's what I think is true and here's why. And if the person doesn't tell you why, you should not trust that person. They should just give you a path that you can judge for yourself if you think it was rigorous and you could go back and verify. Because almost 90% of what Brewster is talking about is verification. And I wanted to add really quickly one thing about Wikipedia. The great thing about Wikipedia and the great thing about the Wayback Machine is that you can go back and look at that struggle. If you go to Wikipedia, make sure you go, there's a history button on any controversial subject. And you can see the entire conversation from the very first day that page was made. You can read every single argument and grabby thing that everybody said the entire time, and then you can see how and why it got to where it is. And it's like Wikipedia Britannica doesn't do that. So it's
having a history, having a lot of active citations, context. I think we do. We have people that are very confused. That we have billions of dollars going to be spent between now and election day to go and cause people to think things that aren't true. Billions of dollars are now been approved by the Supreme Court to go and be poured into the system to go and con people. And so we libraries have got to do what we can within the context that people are working, which is online and the like. It's hard to get into the Facebook and Twitter universe, but Wikipedia welcomes it. So let's go and build a more rock solid world for people to grow on. And I think it's going to be more out of the nonprofit world than the current advertising based for-profit world. But it's a big struggle all the way around. Okay, another question. Oh, have things been from the Wayback Machine in court cases? The answer is all the time, all the time. We are a lawyer's best friend. That is not our target audience, if you will, but they love us. But you know who doesn't donate enough to us is the lawyers. Anyway, but it's used because it's often the only record, and it's been recognized in the courts as being valid. So it's even though it's just what we recorded and it could have been, but it's better than people in jury boxes. Yes.
I recently invented this Grateful Dead time machine, which uses the archive.
Yes. Okay.
And I'm currently actually adding the 78 RPM collection, the George Blood collection.
Have you done this?
Yes.
Who are you?
Steve, I would like to talk to you about this.
Okay, all right. So when, people say, oh, I work for the internet, or internet, it's like, Wayback Machine. Some people go, or you say Grateful Dead. Okay. So we had everything the Grateful Dead ever did. The soundboards, the audience recordings, thousands of recordings, because they basically started the Creative Commons non-commercial use system. They had a tape trading policy that allowed people to go and tape their concerts, and it's been made thousands of all of us into archivists. And so it turns out lots of other bands have copied this, and so there's the live music archive, and about 1 or 2 or 3 bands a day go and sign up and say, yes, you can go and do this, and we get maybe 40 or 50 or 60 concerts a day. It's up to 180,000 concerts across 8,000 bands have been basically put things on the Internet Archive. And okay, I have a story about
all of those bands are accessible through my time machine, which plugs into your stereo, and it has.
Okay, I want it. I want your time machine. Okay, all right. So we were really young as an organization, and we were starting to collect the web. And there was this Cornell grad named John Eisen who was doing our first website, and he said, Brewster, you know those tape traders? The tape trading thing? And I said, yeah, in college, I had my Grateful Dead with all the that was passed around. He said, they're still alive. They're still happening, but it's moved online. And this is in 2001. And he said, what happens is there's a database called eTree, but somebody will go and post one of these on their college website or their FTP site, and they'll email out, here's this concert. And then boom, everybody will go start downloading until the IT group turns it off because it was too much bandwidth. So he said, we should help fix this. And so he wrote an email to the group. He said, we would like to offer you unlimited storage, unlimited bandwidth forever for free. So this email came back from the eTree, said, we don't believe you. Right? It's too big. But if you could do it, it would be our dream. Whenever somebody says that, don't you just have to give it a shot? All right? And we said, work with us. And it was one of the major early uses of the Internet Archive beyond the Wayback Machine was the live music communities, that they had materials that it was okay to share, right? This is a time when all the music companies were suing everybody, grandmothers, it was like everybody was unhappy, suing, except for sort of these bands that wanted to share. And we wanted to support them. And we thought, what is a library for, right? Everything's in copyright and forever. So our shelves are for going and putting creative works of humankind on the shelves for free public access. And we did it, and it's been working ever since. And thank you for building on top of it.
And I also tell all my customers, donate to the archive. I say, I don't want any
So
pressure on you.
So make products on top of it. You have to be a little careful and not sell their things because it's non-commercial use of these materials. But then, yes, please donate to the archive. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
As web pages are increasingly generated on the fly for each visitor, do you ever have to solve the ethical problem of impersonating other people that are not Wayback Machines or archiving?
Good question. So as web pages start to be made on the fly that are personalized, do we have to go and emulate some other person? In general, we have our bot goes in as if it were anybody, nobody. So it doesn't present credentials. It doesn't log in with a password, though we're starting to do some of that for some of the sites, but then they're in sort of private collections. And there's the dynamically created, which we just snapshot what it looks like. Some things are getting more challenging with a lot of JavaScript. So it's a challenge to keep up with the complexity of the web. But fortunately, things are still really being published on the web. I'd say the biggest real competition for us is this thing. It's a phone. A phone is a very locked down thing at every level. So the idea of having an open, interconnected universe, the World Wide Web, it's not on these. So these, it's a silo of little commercial films, and it's impossible to go and archive these things and build on them, or it's very difficult. So let's keep the World Wide Web living, really be the place that's interesting to be on, and keep the technology moving forward, so we don't have to go off into app world. Yes.
If I may, two questions. One is, you mentioned the effort to document the Ukrainian and Russian websites. Could you talk a little bit more about the opportunities and most importantly challenges, hopefully the ones you solved while doing it? And the second question I had was, I'll quote an email. It says, a colleague of mine in Kiev has compiled a priceless archive regarding Ukrainian iconostasis over the last 20 years, including documents and photos. It's less than 1 terabyte. Would archive be a place for storing it?
So let me repeat the question. So in trying to document the websites of Ukraine and Russia, what are the challenges that we've run up against and how if we succeeded? And the other is that there's this collection already that's maybe 1 terabyte of Ukrainian materials. Would we be interested in hosting? So the answer to the second one is yes, right away, please do, send it here now, and or we can have people pick it up. Things are being thrown through the mail. Things are, because the world's in challenging times. So yes. The first question is how to go and do a good job of Ukrainian websites. So we've been archiving, we try to archive everything, but we don't get everything, not the way it should be done. So we started 5 years ago really concentrating on news sites. And we've done better and better and more and deeper on the Ukrainian sites to go and do those ourselves. But there's a project called Sucho, S-U-C-H-O, stands for something. That's run by a woman named in Berkeley, and she's been coordinating with about 1,000 volunteers to go and work with Ukrainian organizations to try to make sure that those materials make it. And we've given them all the free resources of the Internet Archive and archive it and crawlers and the like. And so these 1,000, it is somewhat like the volunteer group that came about when Trump was elected to try to help save the government websites on climate and energy that were seen to be in threat or to be taken down or changed. So there were enormous volunteer efforts. So often it's these volunteers or around disasters, shootings. There's often a group of volunteers that sort of come about to try to make sure that the social media posts around that are, make it. And we act as a back end for many of these projects. They're all evolving, but it's causing more people to get engaged and involved in preserving our digital heritage. So we're really welcoming. These things are just being support to them. Yes.
I know what Sucho stands for. If you want to
Okay, what does Sucho stand for?
Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online.
Okay, say it again.
I'm going to go math, let me do that. Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online.
Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online, Sucho. So that's one project. There are actually a number of Ukrainian projects, and they often end up back with us.
So this is a huge quantity of data.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about your storage space and how do you anticipate how much space you're going to need?
Yes, we're a little over, we're over 90 petabytes of data now. It's replicated, so it's more than that in terms of spinning disks. So it goes megabytes, gigabytes, and 1,000 gigabytes is a terabyte. 1,000 terabytes is a petabyte. So we're almost at 100 petabytes of data. That's a lot. So a channel year of television is 10 terabytes. Right. The Library of Congress is 28 million books. A book in Microsoft Word is about a megabyte. 28 million megabytes is 28 terabytes. We collect that much data before lunch. So it's the scale of sort of what we're doing is just at an enormous scale. We own our own computers. We have copy in San Francisco, copy in Richmond, California, partial copy in Amsterdam, and a partial copy in Alexandria, Egypt, for real. Because what happens to libraries is they're burned, they're destroyed, often purposefully. That's what happens to libraries. The Library of Congress is burned twice. You know, you just go and say, well, how about the Bodleian Library? Isn't that great? It's been around for hundreds of years at Oxford University, and it's terrific. But do you know about the Humphrey Library that was in the same location 100 years before? No? There's a reason for that. It didn't last 60 years before it was absolutely freaking destroyed. A book that I'm reading and I love is called A Library of Fragile History. And it is a great book. It's not just depressing, it's a really good book. I have it in my backpack and highly recommend it. And it basically goes over the libraries and what happens to them. Spoiler alert, it's not good. So we're trying to figure out how do you keep these sorts of things alive and relevant and in touch with what's going on so that it doesn't just become a digital artifact. And at 100 petabytes, almost 100 petabytes, that's a lot of computers. It's growing very fast, about 25% per year at this point. We're funded based on people donating. We do the sort of the Wikipedia or the NPR end of the year, please donate. People are donating. We got about 100,000 people, you know, often $3 or $5, but it's great to have 100,000 people go through the I'm going to donate to you process. We're about $20 million a year, sort of what it costs to run us. And it's because we're part of a big community. You know, it's we want to see more than just us, right? We want more copies, more diverse approaches. So that's sort of where it can go. We break for a couple minutes, stand up, but please stay. I know we're competing against one of the most beautiful days outside. I shouldn't say that. It's really horrible outside. It's raining. You should stay in here. But it's going to be a fascinating conversation with Maria Bustillos, who's really concerned about the future of the book as we go digital. And do we have libraries at the end of the day?
So you're not seeing me right now, but I'm running the computer over here. I'm the head of events at the New York Society of Library ceremony, and I'm just going to voice a few things from the chat from our live stream audience. Brewster, Maria, thank you very much for joining us. Is there anything you want to start with, or shall I throw in?
Yeah, why don't I say a little bit about Maria? But she's done all sorts of more things. But she's a journalist, a book writer, started a cooperative called Brick House, which is trying to reinvent how to get authors paid in this era where the mega publishers aren't doing a very good job of doing that, and has written some very important things. One of my favorite titles was, I think it was in The Nation. Her piece was called "Sell This Book," and the idea that you can actually that people don't sell ebooks, they're all licensed, is something that's really problematic. And Maria's a great expert in this. So anyway, I'm really honored that she flew in from Europe to join in a meeting yesterday about how to help make the book ecosystem work better, and was here for this. So thank you. Should we take a question?
Yeah, so I think this is probably a big one that you get a lot. How does the Internet Archive deal with copyright claims, disputes, and takedown requests?
So most of the takedown requests come in because of the on the Wayback Machine, and people have things that weren't meant for the ages. they might be some privacy things or their blog posts when they were married in a different environment, they would like them not current. And so we participated in a group in 2001 that came up with the Oakland Archives policy, and it's available online, and we try to use that as our sort of guiding posts. It's informed by the ALA policies, how do you take things out of libraries. But we take a lot of those sorts of things down and off. And even sort of when authors might come and say, hey, that was my grandfather's book, why is it there? And we explain. And about 90% of the times, they say, oh, cool, you lend it one person at a time? Terrific, that sounds great. Can I get a copy? And then 10% of the time say, no, I want it gone. We just say, okay, take your grandfather's book off the net. So in general, it's just, we have sort of a bend not break approach. And we work with publishers about some of their concerns and the like. We probably can't get into it, but we were preemptively sued about 127 books that we'd already taken down. And it's an ongoing thing, but we'll probably get into that. Any others?
Yeah, so jumping off, I think a little bit about a point addressed earlier, feelings about the practice of stealth editing of online articles, i.e. correcting content without acknowledging that it's a correction or retraction.
We just try to have multiple copies so that you can, and there's a feature in the Wayback Machine that you can go and say, what are the changes? So if you go to a Wayback Machine page and you go in some of the details, you can actually see when the page changed. So it's the same, it's changed. It's the same. And then you can go and select which ones, and it'll make a little red line version as best it can to try to help you know what changed. And there are a lot of innocent changes, so it's not always a big scandal when a news article is changed. But I think it is important to have the different copies as things come out. The demand for things to come out so fast, especially in news organizations, means that they have to rush things out, and they often do make changes. But there's been some services built on top of the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine to try to detect things that maybe shouldn't have been, or it is a scandal that's not highlighted. And we welcome those sorts of robots to go and try to help provide more context for what's going on out there.
I think it's a good idea to mention too, people may not know that when you go to the Wayback Machine, there's a little bar on the top. I used it for a long time before I even noticed this. That shows there's a calendar and there's a bar on the top where you can choose and look at all the different dates and versions. I mean, the versioning is, like I mentioned earlier, one of the most important benefits of the Wayback Machine, because you can trace over time what has changed. I mean, and there's so many interesting things about that aside from information, like there are, how the design world has changed, how layouts have changed, how mastheads changed. So I would encourage anybody to check out that little bar.
Right, and there's changes, one of those. There's another one that I think is really interesting. It's a little pull down, and it give you an idea of why was this webpage, say that we've got 100 versions of it. Who asked it to be archived? So it's sort of provenance. Because that's interesting to know sort of who cares. Why is this being done? So it's a bit of a meta level, but you can get changes over time. You can find out why it was done, the save page now. There's a lot of information. You can lose yourself in it, and I do.
So you talked a little bit about information that is not accurate and about getting context for that from the same larger picture. How about hate speech or content that is deliberately propaganda? How best to direct people to find context for something like that?
Good question. I think all in all, the whole internet is kind of struggling with some of that. There's some things that we just take down.
So you can, basically, there's not just the Wayback Machine. You can go to archive.org and hit upload. You can upload videos or books or papers or images to your library. You can go and put things up, and people do. And there are some things that we just take down, like close-up violence, or things that are, rips of big commercial, videos, right? That kind of thing. We just take them down. Other things we try to put in some kind of a speed bump to try to help people. Like, you have to sort of go through and understand what it is you're looking at, because it might be a little frightening, right? Or it might be, make you a little uncomfortable. Right now in some states, they're saying you're not allowed to see anything that makes you uncomfortable in a library, which I think is wrong. But you should be given some kind of context for it, and you should sort of know what you're going to go be viewing. So we're trying to figure out, how do you go and do that? So you still have some access to it, but it's within a world that you kind of, all right, I know I'm going into a zone that is kind of, I've got my antennas up.
You want to be responsible. Like, I think about this constantly. It's like the issue of the internet is, you had television, you just told you could not talk back. You couldn't, have a relationship with it. The internet is participatory, and so society itself is struggling with how to make people responsible users of this really, actually quite dangerous and intense, sort of environment. So, I always think of it as kind of like the sign when you take your kid to the, roller coaster and they have to be 4 feet tall or whatever. I just think there should be a little banner to tell people, because what I want to see is people being responsible for their own, sort of that ridiculous alt-right phrase, right? Do your own research or whatever. Well, it's actually true. If you want to understand the world, you have to engage with it yourself and arrive at your own conclusions. And I think that's actually a responsible and good approach for information and dissemination, for librarianship and just life. You teach people to go ahead and learn. And so I think you just you have to be 4 feet tall to look at this website, and that'd be cool.
So, and there's, on the archive site, if you see things, there's a flag button, and we have then people go and look through these things and make sort of our adjustments to how we think these should be displayed and contextualized and preserved. So but it's kind of evolving. And there's some people that just say, well, anything that, like Hitler's speeches should all be banned from the internet. It's like, what, really? But maybe it should be, maybe not put as a major publication level. I mean, the Internet Archive is a library. It's not a publication platform. And if people want to be on a publication platform, go for something like YouTube. And they've got all the servers to be able to go and keep up with that kind of load. We're a library. So we're trying to figure out, how do you go and contextualize things, put some level of speed bump, the 4 foot high.
That's great. Maybe just one more from here for the moment, and then we can circle back later. Live stream participants, do please continue to add your questions and comments in the chat. I admit I don't understand this question, but I hope you do. Thoughts on dark, dim versus light archives?
So first time I heard the term dark archive was actually, I think it was Stuart Brand. I sort of thought, okay, well, we're doing things in the 10,000 year time frame. Why don't we just collect it, put it in a dark archive, don't let anybody see it, and then in 100 years, we'll bring it back. I think this is a terrible idea, and especially in the digital realm, for a couple of reasons. Have you tried to go and get your old, say, emails back from a hard drive that's been offline for a while? It doesn't work. It does, if you don't keep things actively kind of in use at some level, these sort of dark archives, I think, are not practical. They don't really work. Another very practical thing is, if it's dark, nobody's really going to be employed to keep it going. That I think that access drives preservation. That you have to keep things in circulation. And if we knock something offline, like culture, like Cambodia, which really knocked the cultural happenings there by the Khmer Rouge for 25 years, you bring it back to Cambodia and it's almost as if it's a foreign language in some sense, right? It's sort of, so you have to keep things in circulation at some level. So that may be where the questioner is asking about dim archives, right? So how do you go and have, shapes? So there's every library, real library, has got collections that aren't publicly available. They're not. They're kept to the side. The Germans even have a name for it called Giftschrank. Completely mangling that. But it's basically poison cabinet. And it's a place where it's currently not in fashion to have that material. Fashion it's not allowed, it's not proper, it's not, but they don't want to destroy it. So every library has these. And I think it's a very valuable role that libraries continue to have these.
I have a personal example of this. When I went to see David Foster Wallace's papers in Texas, and they had been donated by his estate 4 months previously, and I thought, oh, a lot of researchers have been in there and already looked at everything. But I found in the annotations of his books a lot of very intimate personal information relating to his family. And I didn't know who else had seen this, and I wrote a piece about it because I thought, well, I would just say what I think because everyone else must have seen it. And I published the piece, well, I was the only one who had seen any of it. And afterwards, they poison cabineted those books. But when you go to the Ransom Center in Austin, you can look at them if you're a researcher. You've got to make your case, like why you need to look at it. They're not going to show the stuff to people who have a prurient interest in like learning about David Foster Wallace's family, which was a really troubled one. But they will show to people who have legitimate scholarly interest in it. And I think, again, this is like what we were talking about earlier, like responsible librarianship.
So researcher use is something we do often for bulk access. Is it on?
It's on, it seems to be not.
Hello.
Yes,
I can
good.
yell.
Here, thank you.
Yeah. So we're really interested in getting researchers access to materials in bulk so that they can go and use enormous collections and be able to go and do computer science type research to go and understand things in these materials. And almost everything in a library is copyrighted. So how do you go and do that? And we do this with a legal form that says, be good. And everybody's been good. And it's, so that is another type of level to try to encourage people to come up with a bigger view. My friend Jesse Osabel has a line. He said, humans are really good at learning about the world through the microscope. The microscope opened a world to us, and we made great discoveries. What we need is a macroscope. A macroscope is a way to step back and get the big picture. And especially like with television news and things like that, you only have time to watch one, right? So we all have those relatives that only watch one, and they just tell us endlessly that that's true. And it's, but how do you go and how do we make it so that you can step back and kind of get an idea across all, if television is your medium? So how do you go and have a macroscope? I'd like to see more macroscopes, and these are going to be things that are going to be a little touchy in terms of making them available to specific sorts of folks. I guess that's the end of the online questions for now.
For now.
So Maria.
Sure. We've been talking about digital ownership for a number of years now. And should I start by talking about the lawsuit?
Sure.
Okay, so a group of mega publishers sued the Internet Archive for putting together this national emergency library in the pandemic. There were 90% of children around the world in the early part of the pandemic were put in lockdown, didn't have access to libraries, didn't have access to their schoolrooms, didn't have access to any way to get books. And so the idea of the National Emergency Library was, let's make sure kids can read through their schoolwork, basically, all over the world. And so certain restrictions were lifted, minor restrictions were lifted. Instead of being able to just one book per person at a time, you would be able, on a temporary basis, if you're a student, to like more than one person at a time could read certain books, or I guess the whole open library. And so this was very quickly seized on by the mega publishers who are opposed to the existence of the open library as this is piracy, this, that, made a lawsuit out of it. And so I did some research on it, and the real reason that they were waiting for this moment and why it's so great for the mega publishers is they're trying to make libraries be like Netflix, where your book expires. And it's kind of like when you read the lawsuit, the language is really in there. They didn't actually really care about the National Emergency Library. They just care about suing Brewster so that books will be temporary. And I wrote a piece about this at The Nation that kind of got a lot of play, fortunately. And anyway, to start our conversation, I would like to hear, Brewster, can you explain, what's the best way to explain to people the difference between, why ebooks are books? Ebooks are books, by the way. They are.
I love this line, ebooks are books. Let me try to explain this line, which I think is a good one by Marie. Books, when you buy a book, it's kind of clear what your rights are with it. And you can't do just anything with that book, but you can do a bunch of things with that book. You can hold on to that book forever. You can resell that book. You can lend it to somebody. You can give it to a library. There's certain things you can do, but you can't go and Xerox it and give it out endlessly, right? There are certain things you're not allowed to do. And it's because of this tradition that's codified into the law, and I'm no lawyer, but the first sale doctrine and fair use, that is why we have libraries. So libraries can buy books and lend them, and they can preserve them. Now, let's take the ebook world. I run the Internet Archive. Chris Freeland that's here in the room, is the head of collections, and he's in charge of going and getting the books that are in the collections and working with libraries. And we try to buy all the ebooks we possibly can, but really buy them. So we buy what we can, and if we can't, then we scan what we have to.
Let me bust in for a second and give an example of what happens when you can't buy the book. I did an interview with a lady published in the New Republic who was having to pay $27 per kid per book for the Diary of Anne Frank every year. They expire after a year. I have to buy it again. So this is a very attractive proposition for mega publishers. And they're trying to break the system that Brewster's talking about. So just to give you some context of what happens when that system breaks and why they want to.
So what libraries do is we buy, preserve, and lend. And the publishers are now saying, you cannot buy a book. You have to do this license deal where they expire. You can't preserve a book, and you can't lend a book. It's what's the role of a library? And starts to become, basically a library becomes a customer service department for libraries, for mega publishers' database products. That's what they are. They have nothing at the end of the day. There's nothing on their shelves. There's nothing that they have in perpetuity. And the Internet Archive, we collect all sorts of things that go offline, right? Or go away, or things are out of print. Almost all the books that we have digitized are almost all of them are out of print. The 20th century, these things aren't available in any way in electronic form other than through the Internet Archive. So we buy what we can, scan what we have to, and what we have had to scan. And it's kind of cheesy and gross, right? I mean, you really want a nice looking EPUB, and you get a scanned PDF. It's like, sorry, but it's kind of like when I'm old enough to remember the transition from the LPs to the CDs. And you had your choice of whether you're going to go and make a cassette out of your LP, and it's sort of, not all that great. Or you can get the CD, but you have to buy it again. But now it's even worse. So it's not like, okay, well, let's get the EPUB version because we can't keep it. They want everything to be licensed. And so as best I can tell, this lawsuit is really about not making it so we can take books that we actually really own, physical books, and translate them into the digital world and lend them one reader at a time. We protect them with the same digital rights management software that the publishers use for their in-print works. So our Dusty Musties, our old 19th and 20th century books, which we are basically making as obnoxious to use as the publishers are with their in-print books, right, to go and follow along and be as restrictive. They are trying to stop that. But there are hundreds of libraries that are doing this now. The Internet Archive works with about 80 libraries that use our system to help make it happen. Boston Public Library and many, many others, MIT, on and on and on. But there's also Hati Trust goes and lends their books also through this, and the publishers want it stopped dead.
But that's what we're gonna fight, right? I mean, I'm a publisher, I have a publishing company, and we sold a book to the Open Library for $32, which is the same price as the paper one. There's another problem is like price gouging. And so I sold a book to them and I said, I want to sell you a book and you're gonna have it forever, and it's an ebook. And they're like, cool, and I got $32 for our business, and this is like the sweetest money I ever made, because like able to prove how it should be. Like, this is how it should be, they'll have it forever, and every publisher could do it that way.
And one reader at a time. So there are some indie publishers, and I'd say it's the thing that just differentiates the indie publishers from the mega publishers. So PM Press, AK Press, 1111, they are selling books, really selling. Like, I give you money, we get bits. Sounds kind of capitalistic. It's like, yeah, and it's great. Then so they're selling books, but the mega publishers want to own and control everything, and they're becoming very, very few of them. They're basically becoming platforms in that sort of Facebook, Amazon kind of way, and it's not going to leave much for us at all. We need publishers and authors to get paid. The library system is a $12 billion a year industry. About 3 or 4 billion of that goes to publishers' products. About 20% of the trade book purchases are by libraries. Libraries float the publishing system, yet we're being abused. And we're being sued, and it's not just the Internet Archive. When Maryland said you have to go and license, so the publishers, including Amazon, said we are not going to take our newest books and make them available to libraries at all. They're redlined libraries, and all those people that use libraries, we don't want those people to have access to our books. Awesome, great. All right, so that's what they did. And so Maryland passed a law saying you have to go and license on reasonable terms. And they said license, I would say sell, but they didn't. They did something even more nice to them. And the American Association of Publishers sued. They sued Maryland for daring to say that publishers have to license under reasonable terms to libraries. So we are under attack from the corporate side and also from the political side of book bannings. So Mouse, the book Mouse, we digitized and lent to one reader at a time for about 10 years. And then it was banned by in some of the southern states.
And then the publisher demanded of the Internet Archive that we take it out of the library. It's like, what? I mean, are they in line with what's going on with the government? And it's like, in this case, it didn't look like it, but sometimes they said, no, our sales are doing so well, we want to make sure that one person at a time can't have access to mouse. No, really. So if you check out a book to read it for 2 weeks from the Internet Archive, there are 26 people. If it's back to back to back to back to back to back for that 1 year, that's what they're thinking is so threatening to their world, and they're taking mouse, right, offline. So one of the remedies they want for this lawsuit is they're contesting there's 127 books. These are cherry-picked books, and they're not contesting that there's any financial impact on them at all. So it's not about money, it's about control. And as a remedy, they want us to destroy 2 million digital books, right? Even in Germany, they only destroyed 25,000 books. These guys want us to destroy 2 million digital books.
Like, speaking of the macroscope, other industries have fallen to this model. Like, you used to be able to buy a copy of Photoshop and just use it forever, and it was on discs. And you had it yourself. Like, now, it's in perpetuity. You're gonna pay. You are gonna pay and pay and pay. And so, like, you know, that, and then Spotify, and then all the streaming services, and like, it's like we become more and more like in the Matrix, where you're just pumping your essence into this system. And I mean, I am not like an anti-capitalist, like, you know, as a huge motivator, but I do think that you can practice capitalism in good or bad faith. And I think what we're facing here is like bad faith that has really bad implications on a whole culture that is going to lose access to huge amounts of people. There are huge numbers of people are not going to be able to read stuff. And so I feel really grateful to be here and able to talk to one of the greatest figures of the greatest librarian who ever lived. And so it's true. So speaking again of the macroverse, like knowing that we're facing like this larger sort of economic sort of imperatives that oppress everybody who makes everything. I mean, can you speak a little bit to how the Internet Archive is fighting back?
So we're working with our library friends, and you guys are now deputized to help bring an idea of how we want the ecosystem to work. We want a game with many winners. We want a world that has many publishers, many authors, some of which get paid. Few of them get paid a lot. Most authors often didn't get paid very much. Many bookstores, many libraries, and everyone a reader. We want a game with many winners. How do we go and build that? And I don't think it's going to be by having it all owned by a few mega corporations that control what gets printed and what gets distributed. It's by having an open system ruled by law, not by contract. Ruled by law, not by contract. I mean, copyright has been crafted to be so awful by these guys, and they say that's not even bad enough. We need licenses that don't ever expire and never have a print disabled exemption to it, right? This is on and on and on, right? So how do we go and build that? And we had a fabulous meeting yesterday that Maria came to, Paul Ford, some writers, publishers, but indie publishers and technologists to try to figure out how do we make this work? How can we make a protocol rather than a platform? Which is a bit nerdy, that's a Mike Masnick line. A platform is when there's one corporation that owns and controls something like all movies, right? Like YouTube or Netflix. But a protocol is more like how the World Wide Web or the internet was made, where anybody that plays by the protocol can join in. So you can go and pop up your own website and be able to go and make web pages available.
what if we could have book servers? What if you could go and make a book server as an author or as a publisher, and that would offer books for sale or for keeps or lending if you're a library. So libraries would operate book servers. Turns out there was an idea of this. Okay, we came up with it, made it available 10 years ago. The big publishers didn't come on board, but the libraries did. And we've now got a lot of the pieces, and now we're trying to weave it together so that from your phone, you can go and search and find books through search engines, plural, be able to find where you can buy it and where you can borrow it. And so you say, hey, I'm gonna borrow it, you know, and you can borrow it and you can start reading it on your phone. But if it's a wait list and it's a current popular one, well, maybe I'll pay the $6.99. Buy it, and now I get an EPUB or a PDF that I own in the same sense that I own the book. That's what I think Maria meant by an ebook is a book. That we should basically think of ebooks having the same rights and responsibilities as owning a book. Not these weird multi-page awful. You're from Metro, a library consortium here in New York. Is this a real problem?
I mean, I'm thinking about myself selfishly. I was complaining today about iTunes, how I had made a playlist in iTunes and it was meaningful to me, and then I didn't want to pay them anymore because.
You made a playlist in iTunes and then didn't want to pay them anymore. I'm just repeating it.
Oh yeah, sure. And then when I came back, because I play French horn and symphony, so I wanted to hear a piece and I needed access to the music. And I went to New York Public Library and Axos didn't have it, so I went back to iTunes begrudgingly. None of my playlists are there. So like my intellectual property of like making a thing.
No, now your playlist is not there. You're a French hornist in a symphony.
I want to have my playlist, and they own it, and they can take it away. And it's like that with all the music that I license to them. I would just like to be a music owner again, and I'd like to be able to own books again. So I'm with you.
So
We're gonna make it happen.
I love that, and I'd love to help.
So Jason Scott, who happens to be in the audience here, he runs a group called Archive Team, and he's part of the Internet Archive, so it's sort of an overlapping Venn diagram. And you get called in when websites are about to go down. How often do you get called in for websites that are about to go down? Publishers, basically, that aren't going to support anymore.
Every week.
Every week.
Every week. And it's just a matter of making the right choices.
What are some of the favorite sort of ones that you've helped basically proactively archive when they start to look like they're about to fall over?
Well, there's the greatest hits of GeoCities and
GeoCities,
MySpace's music
MySpace,
and
music
so
collection.
on. But there are cases now where there's these places that are very meaningful to a small group of people, and they have been around for 20 years.
Right.
And the person
Like Chowhound?
leaves.
Like Chowhound, was that one?
There was one that was well, you're making me think of the most touching one, which was the Dogster and Catster.
The dog.
Ooh, Dogster.
Dogster and Catster.
Dogster and Catster.
Which was a social media platform for pets.
Oh, so the pets actually were on the
It
online?
was for the pets.
Okay.
And it had been sold, and the company that had acquired it had holded it for 5 years, decided they couldn't squeeze any more juice out of the lemon, and they were closing it. And the founder came back, joined Archive Team, and helped us rescue it. He wrote custom scripts for it.
Animal rescue.
Okay, so I don't know if anybody. So
And then he died. That was literally the last thing he did, to ensure that Dogster and Catster
Yes.
would live on some paper.
Amazing.
So this was community site. It was a pet site for dogs and cats, and to be a social network. And the founder sold it. The company, of course, goes dead. And then the founder came back, joined Archive Team to archive it, and then passed.
Yes.
So there is.
The whole sort of entropy issue is enormous for us, like as journalists too, like so much of the stuff that we write, stuff gets acquired, or like Peter Thiel decides he doesn't like the place where you publish something, it's like kablamo, there's like, it's gone. And so this is all like, it's important on so many levels, but one of the things I wanted to mention, you're being fooled about this. Like when you go to YouTube TV, for example, I have that, I pay like a certain amount of money every month, and they say like, put this movie in your library. And so you watch it later. And so I had A Brighter Summer Day, which is this Taiwanese classic movie. It's like really long, so I don't have time to watch it. And some weeks went by and it was gone. It was like the $60 does not actually entitle me to infinite movies.
It's not really in your library, it's a fake.
It's not, it's faking you out. And so, but they advertise it to you, like you can have these movies in your library as many as you want, you know, and blah, blah, blah. They don't tell you they expire. And so like the sort of, the profiteering platform companies, and you know, some are worse than others. I think everybody who uses the internet should be thinking very carefully about ownership. Your own stuff, like you're saying. It's like, I mean, I'm really sorry this happened to you, but I'm also like, now we know, right? Like, you're not gonna read 17 pages of terms and conditions, but like, you need to know, do you own this? And that's why we wanna make this platform. You will know that every single thing that you purchase or access through this platform is a real permanent thing that's not going away. Right?
Digital ownership.
Digital ownership.
Questions?
How do people get involved? How can like we support that notion?
Well, let me tell you, my email address is maria@popula, popula.com. And I'm kind of like, I started this sort of steering committee for it and just yelled at everybody until they all got in a conference room. It was pretty great. And sort of, I can sort of steer your concerns or you know, if you want to volunteer to the person.
I think as libraries, and as reading public, we should just demand of our vendors and of ourselves and the people we know. And don't believe the hype. You know, around this lawsuit, there was this tremendous amount of incorrect information propagated by trade associations that they are smart enough to know where it was not right. And it was mimicked and republished by the New York Times. And so like, and you know, a lot of those people are looking for book deals from these very few publishers. And so, you know, we need, you know,
Allies, we need allies in the fight.
we need allies.
But I mean, you know, there is a lot of misinformation out there, and a lot of times journalists will get hold of a story and it sounds kind of sexy, and they'll talk to somebody who's all upset, and they're not gonna go into all the minutia of, you know, sort of constitutional rights and, you know, right of first use and how fair use works. Intellectual property law is quite complicated, so librarians are the allies that we really need for the public, you know, because it's really, what it winds up being about is the preservation of digital culture for the future. It's the posterity of the digital commons. If this work isn't done, it will be possible for large platforms and all kinds of like bad actors or people with, you know, imperials of every kind to shut off access. We've already seen in the last few weeks where there were a lot of, there's been a lot of conservative activism around shutting down access to LGBTQ materials for young people. They shut off the entire library system for 40,000 kids in Texas in this one school district for weeks because somebody found an LGBTQ book in a library. They're like, now nobody, I mean, this is gonna happen writ large. It's actually, it's a real emergency for the culture.
So I think we need a decentralized, distributed set of authors, publishers, libraries that are under law, that go and make sure people get paid. People will pay. But how do we go and get it to the right people out of this, in this ecosystem? So let's go and build a better internet. Let's build an internet that's got information on it that we at least know where it came from, that we have lots of voices available, diverse voices, on the web, also in the book world. So our music is continuing to be diverse because the levels of control can come in through all sorts of ways. Now that we have very few corporations running large parts of our ecosystem, and governments having a increasingly activist interest in what's being presented, and they know that they can go and lean on these companies and make them do what they want to do.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think the New York Society Library here is a hotbed of authors. So let's do something here. Let's go and make it so there can be small libraries in the future. One of the library exemptions in the copyright law is section 108. So one of the things that the publishers are trying to say is the Internet Archive is not a library. And they actually, every time this area gets brought up, the publishers and their trade association want to regulate who can be a library, right? Who's allowed to be called a library? And so would this library, if it were started today, be allowed to be called a library by those publishers? I would not say so.
On that note, it's like, that's a perfect thing to say, because this is since 1754, right? What we're really talking about is preserving the book culture that we love as writers and archivists and librarians. This isn't like, we're not trying to make a new thing, like we're like special internet thing where we're gonna rip people off. No, it's the opposite. It's preserving a thing that has existed for hundreds of years so that it will stay the way that we expected it to stay and not suddenly be taken over by a few platforms.
Any other questions? We should lighten up a little bit. How about a happier question?
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing to do in New York City?
Watch people. I like, this is a walking city and it's alive right now in a way that some parts of San Francisco are really quiet. But I had to walk from 31st to 57th on Broadway last night at 9:30. And so I had to walk through Times Square. It was thriving, it was crowded. It was that sort of Grand Central Station. You had to sneak by people to be able to walk. People were out taking more photos of themselves than I'd ever seen. It was it was almost as crowded as that one time. I think people only go one time to see the ball drop. But it was that crowded and people were smiling and happening. It was, I think, New York was on parade. I think just people are smiling, having a good time, just being out with each other, looking at each other. But I'd say my favorite thing of New York is just street life.
After the pandemic, like every time I hug someone, I like practically burst into tears. Are we good?
Carolyn,
Yes,
you run this library.
I do.
So let me put you on the spot. You're gonna have to talk loud enough so that so what are the challenges that you see your library going through as you're moving electronic? Do you see some of these issues as a running a library?
I do. Well, the part of it is, we talked about the cost of having to buy books over and over again. I mean, we're a 268-year-old library. We're very good stewards of our materials, and we have had copies of some print books for centuries. But now we are buying ebooks. There is a demand for it. We want to provide this to our members, but it's expensive. We have to keep buying these books over and over again, and it's problematic, and I don't know if it's sustainable, because we are then buying a copy, and when it's, the popularity of the book declines, let's say, we are probably not going to buy a new copy of it, another copy of it. Whereas the print collection, if a book wears out, because we have heavy readers here, so we're not buying, we're not precisely a special collection. We are a circulating library and always have been. So our books are used and loved and beat down, and but if a book is beat down too much and our conservator can't fix it or whatever, we'll buy another copy of it for the collection. But I don't know that that's going to be the case with the ebooks.
Like online, you guys can't see where this room that you're in. There are floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that are just full of these older books that are just gorgeous. And I just wonder how many of those publishers are still publishing that book. And I would say none. And so if we're going to have the equivalent of the New York Society Library have bookshelves in the electronic world, when publishers are long gone, or the publishers may still be around, but they're not publishing that book anymore in the new version, that it's up to libraries to go and have bought those ebooks and kept them reformatted into whatever that new way is, whether it's a talking book or a book that you can walk into in a VR environment, whatever Jane Austen becomes. How are we going to go and make it so that the future of books are supported by the library system when we're not allowed to own or touch these books? They might be surrounded with digital rights management in ways that we can't even get them. When a library buys a book from Overdrive, it's temporary, and they don't even get a copy they can reformat. So how do we go and have a system that works better in this realm of books? And it's for the love of books. And I would love to see the New York Society Library and all the other independent libraries reach out to their communities to go and make sure their books that they're writing, or their movies, or their music, or whatever it is, the French horn players in your membership have a place for their cultural offerings to live on. That's a role of a library. Think of it as a broad opportunity that and I especially like the independent libraries. The independent libraries, the directors of them, and Carolyn is the wonderful example of this, feel empowered in a way that a lot of librarians don't. They feel like they're part of some system, that they're part of a provost, something or other. They're sort of part of something that they can't make a lot of decisions on their own. But the independent libraries, they're often like, nah, let's try that thing. I think we should use and go for another whole generation of independent libraries. If we were at 3,000 at the Civil War and we're down to 21, maybe we should get back up to 1,000. Or go to the Mechanics Institute Library in San Francisco. Go to the Redwood in Newport, Rhode Island, Boston Athenaeum. Can you think of other of these? What are some other of the independent libraries?
Well, there's a new one that just opened, the first in like a century in
Wow.
Seattle. Folio in Seattle is the first membership library to open in the United States in over a century. It just opened in 2015.
Let's go become members.
Yeah.
I'm a member of this library because I love this library, not because I live here. I'm a member of the Redwood. So go and become Folio.
Folio. in Seattle.
Folio. So let's go and support a new generation of libraries. And that, I think, is something that we can all do and enjoy.
Yeah, and that way all the ebooks will be here 265 years from now.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
And whatever ebooks become.
I think
Because we're gonna run out of space.
You can put them in a little thing.
Bits are cheap.
Yeah.
Bits are cheap. Fortunately, things, yes, you can have your own terabyte or petabyte, and you can afford it. That's another thing that I think we need to do more of, is have more folks that are in the library world know how to deal with bits. And so that we're not at the beck and call of every vendor. We can go and have our own collections, and at least they're preserved.
You'll have to teach us.
Hmm?
You'll have to teach us.
Absolutely, and there's also cooperation between the libraries. Again, sort of Interlibrary Loan is just an amazing resource. It's libraries helping libraries. New York Public Library did an app. They actually paid to do an app, I think under the funding of the Arcadia Fund, called Simply E. And it's by and for libraries. And it's open source. So it's done on so imagine going and having that to be able to borrow things, and you can. from the New York Public Library and from the Internet Archive. And we're working to try to make our books look better on those platforms.
I feel kind of pissed when you say that you don't like the PDFs, because I love them, even though they're a little raggedy, you get to see like all the little stamps from all the
And how they were
libraries.
designed, and they don't reflow, but they were designed by somebody.
Yeah, I love that. I feel,
I like book design.
yeah, I'm speaking on their behalf. One thing I wanted to say was about preserving the ebooks forever. Everybody wants this except for the mega publishers. Like, I'm a writer and I want this. I want libraries to have it. Like, one of the neatest things in our meeting yesterday was like the librarians were like, oh, the writers don't want stuff in libraries. And we were all screaming, yes, we do. We totally do, because then it will be forever. There will be a place to put it. And one of the coolest people who's involved in this effort is Alice Waters from Chez Panisse. She has a project called the Edible Schoolyard that is actually not for sale. She's trying to disseminate this for free, but there's not really a good way for her to disseminate the curricula and slideshows and all kinds of things that she has for teachers to use to create gardens in schools, and then the kids plant food and they harvest the food and it's part of their school lunches, and that's what Edible Schoolyard is. There's all these lessons and curriculum and stuff around it. It's the neatest thing. They made one of them and then like thousands of people are using their plans now, but it's hard to get sort of a circulation for it. So people like Alice, people like me, anybody who wants to make sure that stuff will be there for people who want to read it and use it later, need Brewster. And they need these tools that we're all gonna get together and develop. And so I'm really glad that I'm here in New York doing this and talking with you.
Are there any more questions from anyone?
Just another vote in favor of PDFs as book design. I think there's like a misconception that because digital content can be endlessly copied, it can't be studied. But I learned in doing book studies, we now know that Gutenberg had to switch paper suppliers because there was a vellum shortage, but we know that because the grain changed in Gutenberg Bibles in the paper. But we only know that because in the last 10 years, we looked at pages again and noticed, bam, the grain is going a different direction after this date. And PDFs do the same. There's some great blog posts on PDF archaeology on the Mueller report and on the recent Supreme Court case, trying to figure out where these PDFs were authored, who had them, what computer was used. There's a lot of metadata in PDFs.
I have a question for Brewster too. Okay, so you want to be happier and more hopeful. What is the thing that makes you the most hopeful? Like, what do you want to see happen like in the next year that would make you happy?
I think the heroes of the internet are a lot of not the people that are running big mega corporations making billions of dollars from us. It's actually the people that are participating, making the weird, wonderful things that you find on the internet. I don't know, manual sites, right? Or Jason Scott, who's here, deals with a bunch of these sorts of folks that go and spend their days ripping their favorite games from these BBC lost platforms of computers, and then going and making them available online. It's really quite selflessly. The people that go and write blogs still, if I were to take the eras of the web, there's sort of Web 1, Web 2, Web 3 people are talking about, I'm going to define it a different way than maybe others have. Web 1, I think, is based on pages. And it may have been a little bit of a weird, kind of a fake, because it's not really a page, because the average life of a web page is 100 days before it's changed or deleted. But it was a page. You were writing a page. And it was good enough to go into a library, and the Internet Archive, though, and there's a library, and put the pages in the library and tried to preserve these. And people worked at them, whether it's Wikipedia or your blog posts, and you knew that it was going to last because it was a page. Web 2 is the land of feeds. And isn't that sort of what horses do? You put in a trough, you put your face in it, right? And it's a feed. And at the end of the day, what do you have to show for it with these feeds? You get followers and rage. That's sort of the only thing that sort of is left over after these sort of feeds of sort of stuff spewing by. So if we're going to go and make a next generation, I don't think we should go backwards. So everybody has to go back and have a WordPress blog, but they are pretty great. Let's go and make things where we take all of this effort that people are doing and have something to show for it. So we're building things together. I think Wikipedia is one of the greatest things that people have done. I think it's up there with the 747, Boeing 747 airplane, right? They can fly through the air. All right, the Wikipedia shows that we can actually work together productively to do something freaking huge. I even think TED Talks are pretty great. And the weird little corners of the YouTube universe are pretty great. So how do we go and have things that, for the periods of time, the attention that people are putting at things, it's not just time wasted. That it's drawing on people's expertise, they're learning from each other, they're building on each other. That's the web next generation that I would like to see more of, rather than just things that scroll by and leave basically not much.
I think there's evidence that this is happening to a certain degree because like Facebook, for instance, when it first started, you could put your favorite things on a list and anybody on Facebook you could see all the other people who had put it. So I used to have a game of I would put James Thurber and see that there's one person in Taiwan who's super into it, and you could contact that person. But at first, right, because the platform hadn't taken control of every interaction on it, try to monetize and get information, they hadn't figured out how to do that yet. So you could just openly by yourself contact somebody and get to know them. You can't do that anymore. And so I kind of think people want to do that. And as bad as feeds can be, I think for somebody like me, Twitter is really super invaluable because if something terrible happens like it did in Ukraine, I can just ask, can put me in touch with somebody there now, in Mariupol or whatever. And somebody would, within 5 seconds, you can find out what's going on the ground from somebody anywhere in the world in real time. So many of the things that the internet was able to do for us are magical, take for granted now, a little box with a map of the world street by street in your pocket. I didn't grow up thinking that such a thing was possible. So there's all these really beautiful and great things and magic at the same time.
So there's another person in this room that's really of quite note. It's Bob Stein. Who did the best of the CD-ROM era called the Voyager, of how, and a lot of the web has never actually grown to have the level of sensitive interaction design that was there. But he's been working on something that I think is really interesting and highlighting. I guess I got to know you in this generation when you were talking about social reading. How can we read a book together and productively and go and add into it? How do you have, by reading, to have a book club, annotations, and grow around the context of somebody else's writings? So instead of, let's rage about this, which is sort of the Twitter thing, is how do you go and take a book and make it social? But that was 10 years ago. A new thing, Bob, do you mind if I talk a little bit about Tapestry?
No, or I can.
Why don't you do that?
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
There's a microphone. Come on up.
about a year ago, Brewster asked me and a former colleague to sort of think about how the archive could be more useful to its users. And we came up with this little aphorism, which isn't really original, but it will make sense to everybody in the context of this really good discussion. That the reason for
If you come over here, there's a little video. There's more people out there than in here.
that there's that the reason why we collect the past is to enable the present to get ready for the future. And in order to do that, you have, I mean, the Internet Archive has, as Brewster has told you, it's unparalleled, an amazing collection of everything that humanity has managed to figure out. And in order for it to be more useful, we need to be able to get at it. We need to be able to take this passage from this book, this bit of music from over here, this audio. We need to be able to manipulate knowledge in new ways, to put things together in new ways, to discover. I mean, that is how discovery takes place. And everything I have done pretty much for the last 40 years has been trying to understand how to reinvent the book for the future, but that has always meant how to reinvent the linear spine. I did something called the Criterion Collection, which some of you may know. To me, a movie is a linear text. It just happens to be a lot of pictures, one after the other. Finally, though, thanks to Brewster's sort of pushing us, we got to a point where we got rid of the spine completely. We're now no longer thinking about the future of the book as being something that is tied to linearity, but something that is in effect a collection of objects that someone has made, they've made this collection in order to show show context and show connections. And this, we've been showing it for the last few weeks, and it's been so exciting to see people go, oh my gosh, you know, this actually does feel different. And one last thing, to me, PDFs are fundamentally the last gasp of the print era. Whether they've been useful, whether you like them or not, okay? They come out of the print era. What these tapestries that we've been making are portable. They're a new media type. There's a compound illustration where you can take a tapestry you've made and you can post it theoretically in a Wikipedia page. It's a huge, huge difference, and it feels right. It feels like suddenly we're coming into our own in the digital era and starting to develop new modes of communication which are not based in print, as much as I love print here.
Thank you. For the love of books, you're inventing the next generation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming, those of you here in person and those of you online. And thank you, Maria Bustillos and Brewster Kahle, and everybody from the Internet Archive team who's here. There's a lot of you here. This has been great. This is wonderful. And we will be making this recording available to everybody afterwards. If you catch everything, we can rewatch it and learn again. So thank you again. It was great.
Thank you.